Most leaders have been told to tell better stories, but almost none have been told what a story actually does inside a human being. Author unknown. Why some stories change people and most don't. And welcome to another edition of Author Unknown. And very excited to get into our author and her experiences today. Among other things, has actually written a workbook on quantum physics. So we're grateful to be entangled with this particular author on this call. I'm going to throw it over to my co-host, the man who has never lost a clogging championship in his entire career, Jeff Stutz.
That's good, Platt. Welcome, Kristin Mackey. We are so excited to have you on. So she is a consultant, a speaker. She has been deep into changing people's lives for her career, and she's got some really interesting parts of her journey that we're going to have a lot of fun with. One, as Platt kind of playfully mentioned that she did a workbook on quantum physics. That is no lie. She absolutely has gotten into neuroscience, neuropsychology, quantum physics, how the brain works, how we operate as human beings, all around this concept of energy and becoming and how we become, and really kind of manipulate, not in a negative way, but in a positive way, create our lives and create our destiny. So we're excited to talk to her. She's also recently has put out a book called Frequency Matters, which obviously taps into the whole idea of energy, vibration, manifesting all those types of things, but diving deep into the quantum side and particles and waves. So we're gonna have fun. That's what I do know. We're gonna talk about her journey in writing. But as we get started here, Kristin, maybe you can give the listener just a couple of minutes of your journey in your career, in your life, and also kind of the beginning. We'll dive into it, but kind of the beginning stages of writing your first book and then your second book, and then we'll see where the conversation goes from there.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both. It is such an honor to be in this space and be entangled. I love that you said that because that really is something that happens at an energy level when we interact with each other. I mean, I haven't flown anywhere or traveled anywhere, but we certainly collapsed space just in this video recording, didn't we? I'm looking at two boxes with individuals here, and we're having a conversation, and we collapsed that. And I think my journey to being a writer is something I truly believe I was born to do. I was a very sensitive child. I was that kid that everyone was playing a certain way, and I just loved to just dig in the dirt and pull up the worms and make them my friends. And this sensitivity was something that led me to want to understand a little bit more about the nature of things. What makes life what it is. I was an empath is the formal word for it, and I found myself. I always laugh. I say I came from the feel bad family. We're very empathic in my family, and I always felt bad, but it wasn't productive when you're feeling sorry for the lawn being cut, that your father's cutting the lawn and you feel that the grass is being hurt. So we really needed to look at that
Did you go?
level.
Did you go out there and like lay in front of the lawnmower and say, "Stop killing the grass"?
Yes, you're hurting it. Yes, exactly. And it really wasn't taken seriously and for good reason, that level of sensitivity. But it did lead me to exploring, reading, asking certain questions, and that led me on the trajectory of wanting to crystallize that into a material book.
So we'll be very sensitive because Platt will oftentimes cry on these podcasts, and I know that you will absolutely empathize with what his feelings and emotions are.
Yeah.
No, I love that about you. Absolutely, that's a really a unique gift that you have. That is not very common to be able to sense and feel what others are. So absolutely honor that gift that you've been given in life. You were talking about how you just this journey as far you felt kind of like you were called to write. You mentioned earlier in one of our conversations as far as that your favorite thing to do was to get books and even encyclopedia. Like what was your idea of like a great gift for you? Maybe share just kind of your whole learning, your journey and learning and reading and all those things.
Of course. I remember as a child that it wasn't something that I sat down and thought, I want to write a book. It was pure instinct. I remember going to sort of the five and dime store with my parents, and we were walking around, and I would see these big, fat, like, white pads of paper, and my whole soul lit up. I thought, "Oh, the infinite possibilities with that paper," and I would get the paper and, it was my parents would say, "Kristen is very easily entertained, like, if all we have to do is buy her a stack of white paper, we're good." But I would it truly was my favorite thing, and it was this tablet, must have been, like, this big, and I would get it, and then I would get the staple gun, and I would just staple books together, and I would get my pens, my markers, and I would just start drawing these books. I would do covers, and then I would write activities, and you're inspired as a kid. You get a coloring book, you get an activity book, and you see them, and you get inspired, and so I would sort of create these books, and then I would go around the neighborhood, and this is true, and knock on the door and say, "Hey, I made these books. Does anybody want one of these books?" And I was humored, and folks would say, "Oh, here's a quarter for a book," but I was so excited about it because I would draw the covers, and they were handcrafted. And so that is really where it started. It was truly lighting up at something,
You
seeing
said
it.
something.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead. Go finish
No,
your
no,
thought.
just seeing it and lighting up.
You said something that sparks something with me sometimes when I'm working with writers, and sometimes I sit on these panels at Comic Cons and different places because I wrote a fantasy book, so you get invited to those kinds of things when you do. And, people come up and they'd talk about, well, I don't know if I should outline my books or if I should just write my books. And it was exactly what I asked them is, when you see that blank page, are you excited by the ultimate endless number of possibilities that is inviting you to step into and create? Or are you thinking, holy crap, I got to wrestle this thing down and figure out what I'm doing? And if it's the former, you're probably a discovery writer. If you wake up and you love that blank page, then there's something about just writing and not overthinking. And to your point, take out the marker and just do something, right? So you just lean into that. And if it's not, that's when you talk to writers about outlining, starting to put their thoughts together, like, because that it just feels very differently. So I love that was your reaction, just because it confirms a lot of how writers sometimes, because sometimes people feel like, well, I don't feel that way when I see a blank page. I feel the opposite. I don't feel empowered and excited in this wellspring of creativity that's about to happen. And it's like, what, that's okay. That's not every writer feels that way. So there's two paths into that. So I love that you had brought that up.
Oh, I just got chills. I love when there's that resonance, the particles are, "Oh, you had the same, story or experience." And something you said that was really important is, our brains are different. So someone might have this genius, this incredible amount of creative energy, that if they had, the journal that's blank versus the journal that has prompts, sometimes that prompting is exactly what an author might need to say, "Oh," and it's like pulling a string, and as they pull the string, this whole world starts to come in, and their creativity just blossoms. And so I love that, not you didn't discourage someone if they weren't excited, but at the same time you completely understand that feeling of infinite possibilities.
Yeah. 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 Uh, Jeff, you have something that I can
Well,
feel.
yeah, you can feel it because we have an energy connection
We
here,
do.
as
Yeah.
Kristen's talking about. So as you were feeling this resonance, I was feeling the dissonance because I was the opposite person when I saw the blank page. I was like going, "There's no way I can fill that page." And I'm in my journey, Kristen. You may not know this, but in writing my first book, and it's been something that I felt like has been inside me for years. And in my career, Franklin Covey and consulting and leading and developing people through my life, it's always been this passion, and I see people around me like Platt and other colleagues that have worked, especially ones that have worked for Franklin Covey. It seems like they've all written their book and they're on to their third, second or third book now. And I'm just getting to mine. And I am so grateful for the prompts that AI and Claude can give me because it helps pull out of me all of this stuff that I've been wanting to get out there. But I have felt called. I know you felt called in writing your books. Your first one that was kind of the workbook on quantum physics with the cartoon characters. Share what you were feeling as far as why did you feel called for that particular content and what you were, trying to achieve. And I also love the fact that you're passionate about helping this younger generation. That's one of my big motivations. I've got adult age children now that are 17 to 30, and my heart just goes to that generation to somehow convey the wisdom that I heard learn. I remember walking into the college bookstore when I was a sophomore and coming across the brand new display. It was like in 1990, 91, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And that cover just called to me. I picked it up. I started to flip through the pages, and that one experience completely changed my life. Little did I know that would eventually lead to my discovery of Stephen and the company and my work that I'd get involved in. But that same calling that I felt as a college sophomore is the same calling that I feel now towards my kids, wanting to watch them have these experiences that awaken them to become something more than what they can become.
Yes, no, I think that that's beautiful. And one of the things that stands out, Jeff, is that you allowed yourself to be moved by that which comes up from within. Being able to walk in a bookstore and be receptive and see the 7 habits of highly effective people, be drawn to that, follow through with that, and say, wow, this it has enhanced my life in the way that it has. Sometimes I think we have filters or fears, and individuals feel that they have these blocks that if they just relaxed a little bit and allow themselves to perceive sort of the magic, that is around us, they'll find inspiration everywhere. And it really is that mindset of being receptive to if I might, the universe is always working to support us and to give us the opportunities and the people and the connections and the resources and even just the inspiration that we need. But being in a space of receptivity is a very important thing. And I know for me, what drove me to write a book about quantum physics is I wanted to make sense of what I was feeling. And so I would read one book and then I would read another and then another and another, and I would find parallels in everything. I would find parallels in everything, and I would feel stuck. I would say, okay, so this answers this question, but it doesn't answer that question. And I really get this over here. But you know what? It's not, it doesn't fit over there. And I would find myself, I actually wrote a book very early in my life called The Architect. And it was all about we are the architects and we are and I didn't think anybody would like it or want it. It had 73 pages and I threw it out and I
Mm.
threw it out. And I think there's just such I look back at, sometimes when you have a calling, move through it. I finally got the courage to put the book together. You Can, You Will, You Did, Frequency Matters. Once I got that courage to put it together, it made sense to me. It was almost as if I was trying to make sense of what I was thinking, what I was feeling, and what I was experiencing that I could not find on the bookshelf. I don't know if that makes sense, but I just could not
Absolutely.
find it on the bookshelf.
So
I
you've go ahead, Platt. Go ahead.
oh, I was gonna say that there's so many things that that lights up in my brain as you're talking about things, but, one of them is just this idea of just pushing through, and we've talked about this with other writers. And if I could identify, with working with various authors, there's a few things in common. Almost all of them struggle with that first draft. They almost all struggle because because I think if you want to write a book, you're a bit of a perfectionist in some levels. You certainly have a point of view. You've had some success. You're driven, and it's very hard to not go back to those first 3 chapters and rewrite and reread, and the next day you read it again and you rewrite it again, and you just get stuck in this loop. So, one, just it's validating to talk about this idea of just getting through. But the other piece that really struck me is, we talk about probably one of the other common things I see a lot, and I think this would surprise a lot of folks, is that they think this is unique to them, is imposter syndrome. And, like, you'd be surprised at how many authors actually really doubt their ability to write. Like, I would say most of the authors I work with do not come to this thinking, I am a writer, I am an author, I am going to just conquer this world. They're like, I don't know if I can do this. Who am I to, like, they're very much struck with imposter syndrome. And when you talk about frequency, I know you talk about it as a state of being, right? It's this alignment between who you are and how you show up. And if I can get even more nerdier with quantum physics and say, can we think about this? What is the term now? The probabilistic nature, right? So nothing is set until it's consciously observed, right? That everything's in this probabilistic field. So if you're, as a writer, you're in this probabilistic field, but can you choose? So let's say you're not wired like the three of us, and you're like, we want to write. We're excited to write. We've had a book in us, our whole lives. But if you're like, oh, that's not me, but I do want to do this, but I don't know if I can. Like, talk about how frequency, how you choose to show up, is actually within your control, and how that could serve you as a writer, and how you would recommend that to authors.
I love that. It's inspiring the individual to override their own limited thinking. We never want to argue for our limitations. And we human beings, we do that. We're not good enough, or we read other authors and we compare and contrast. And one thing I often say, to help individuals sort of bang the tuning fork, to say, you haven't happened yet. You haven't happened yet. So if there were an author listening in, I would say, well, you haven't happened yet. So that means your voice, your unique voice, your unique perspective is so original because you haven't happened yet. You can be inspired by someone else. You can learn from the great, and learn from their errors, or their drafts, and keep massaging the clay. But I think the biggest challenge often happens is the individual feels that they look outside of themselves, they compare, and they feel that they're not qualified to have their own perspective. And I challenge them on that. That's your perspective. There's no other particle in the universe that has your perspective. So when you want to crystallize that into something like a book, or any kind of artwork, that is an exciting invitation. If it comes up from inside, and you start to feel that, oh, I'm not good enough, well, you're probably gonna not be good enough, because you're going to tell yourself that. But if you tell yourself, there's not a single collection of particles just like me. There's not a single recipe out there that is just like me. And if I want to write a book, well, the invitation is up to me.
I love it.
As you dive in into that kind of unfolding that a little bit more, as far as that frequency and into your writing, what is it that you do? And as you've tried to really enhance, I think about some of the work that you've done, the fact that you've written on energy and frequency and particles, all this stuff, and then you're also a writer and a creator. What is it that you kind of do to set your own kind of frequency channel, to kind of channel your creativity, to kind of unleash the beast inside and awaken the soul to where you're in this creative mode, and kind of in that flow state with your energy, and then you're, or whether it's your writing or your speaking, are there some little practical things that you do to kind of center yourself and ground yourself to feel in connection with your audience, whether it's the reader or in person on stage?
Yes, every time I do a seminar, or keynote, I meditate for about an hour just to center myself. That way, and I say a prayer, and I set an intention on what I would like to experience energy wise in the space. Bring out the best in me, bring out the best in my audience. Let us all come together in something co-creative and beautiful, and that setting that intention creates a sort of energetic space for that. That's the energy work, the pause, the intention, the presence, meditation. The practical, we are human. I am 3D, so I always like, I feel better when my life is organized. I keep things organized and simple because I am so sensitive. So I find myself getting really impacted by clutter and the physical. However, here's the caveat. When I'm creative, I call it bubbles and cubes. And I have a journal for bubbles and I have a journal for cubes. And the bubbles are, we don't write a book, we write a mess and then we clean it up. I've never written a book. I write an absolute mess. If you could have seen my home when I was writing Frequency Matters and I was drawing the cartoons and I had them on the window, there was paper all over the house. And I remember my husband was, what are you doing? This is the bubbles part. This is the part I'm getting creative because my mind would go here, it would go
I
there.
love it.
Right?
I
And then
can totally visualize that
yeah,
same process. Yeah.
right.
So that's the bubbles. What's the cues?
The cubes are when you finally get all the information and you start to really connect the dots. What is the theme here? I'm identifying the theme. What am I seeing pop up a lot? What is repetitive? How can I say something a little differently? How can I illustrate a point or a story a little bit more in a clarifying way? Is there a voice from the beginning of the book to the back of the book that is the same voice? And that is one of the biggest challenges I've learned in just writing, is that you can be in a really good mood when you're writing one part of the book. And then you have a bad day and you're writing chapter 2 and suddenly you're this hardcore business person. And yesterday you had butterflies floating around. So it's so important to recognize we're human, we're dynamic. We have different energies. So once that bubbles section, then you move into the cubes and you recognize I have to make this coherent. I have to make this organized and make sense. And then you then pop yourself out of the creative process and you look at it from the lens of my reader is now going to read this. And you want the reader, in my experience, to feel completely like they're having a one-on-one conversation with you. They're safe. They know you as a person. They're holding a part of you. And so you want that to be really intimate. And part of that intimacy is being fearless. Those filters come in. Oh, I don't want to put that in writing. And sometimes you have to be mindful of that. But there are certain things you want to put in your book because that's going to connect your audience to your humanity. They're going to be able to identify with your perspective. They're going to be able to put themselves in your experience. And when they can put yourself into your experience, magic happens. That's been my experience.
I love that. When I use a metaphor as well to talk about the process, so I talk about it as clay on the potter's wheel. And for new authors, they like they want to be in the front. They want to be in the front of the store where all the finished pottery's at, and then they look at the mess in the back room. Like, no, we're in the back room. This is the messy room. Like, you don't get to look at it. It doesn't move to the front of the store and as a beautiful finished piece yet. Like, we are in the mess. We are clumping clay, and that's the process I always call it. So it's just stream of consciousness. It's just throwing things together. It's just getting through the process because, to your point, once we get there, we'll go back and we'll shape it and we'll refine it and we'll remove some things and we'll, and then we'll, fire it and glaze it and however far you want to take the metaphor. But the
Love that.
fact is that's it, and it is intentionally messy, and I think some people lean into that mess and they kind of just get it, and others are like, this is really, really uncomfortable. I think one of the best books that was never written was with a gentleman that I was working with who was an engineer, and he's a Guinness Book of World Record holder. He climbed the 7 tallest mountains and then sailed the 7 oceans on a sailboat. And so his name's Martin Frey. Love him. He's probably okay if I mention his name, but Martin is an engineer, and it was so difficult for him to get out of that sort of very precise, very exacting, moving linearly from this to this to this to this. I hope Martin has finished that book, and I hope he does finish that book. But I there was so much I learned, and there was so much that book has to offer the world, and I'm fearful that it'll never get out because it just couldn't get out of the back of the shop. He couldn't live with the mess, and that is, in my experience, that is a big part of being an author.
I love that. You explained it absolutely beautifully. And the visceral experience that I have when I write is while I'm in the mess, if I identify with the mess, then I will get frozen. I will be paralyzed in the creative process because I'm so impacted by clutter.
Yeah,
So what I often do is I create a space that's very organized. And so if you can if you are that way, if you have these barriers and these blocks to the creative process, finding a space in your home that you allow to be messy, and then you can just shut the door. Have your whiteboard, have your mess, and then when you shut the door and you're in that new space, your mind will reflect that a little bit. You'll start to percolate the ideas a little bit more, and when you go back, you'll be able to clarify how you want to move forward with it. So
I
I
love that.
find, yeah, that space plays a role in it too.
When you were writing, because you've learned so much about the your process, creativity to structure and all that, the bubbles and cubes. I love that. Did you have help? I mean, Platt's a ghostwriter, so he's helping writers all the time, pull it out of them. If it wasn't for Claude, I wouldn't be getting anywhere with my book. So, I mean, it was interesting today. I was actually just in the process of restructuring again, another part of it. And it's always telling me how brilliant I am. So I love that. It's like, well, that was a brilliant restructure and reframing, Jeff. You're just right on it. And I'm like, well, yeah, I am damn good. I love this. And and then I'm like remembering some guidance that I've had, like going, quit asking or telling Claude what you're gonna do without asking it to challenge you. So then I asked it to challenge my thinking and my framework. And then it gave me all this criticism and fixes. I'm like, well, now I don't like you as much. But using a ghostwriter or Claude or whatever it is, did you have any kind of help, or was this just things that you've learned on along the way, trial and error, especially with the fact that you started so young in the process?
I honestly learned along the way, and if you'll see the spelling errors. The book is laced with embarrassing moments. But I wanted to write it according to the way my brain worked, and every time I would look at how it was structured, I wanted only a few lines and then space, only a few lines, and I wanted to sort of tell a story with a cartoon, few lines, a space, a cartoon, because that is how my body, frankly, felt good reading it. I would see a pop and then a cartoon and then a pop. It's sort of it pins back to storyboarding. But I will say, to have a resource like Platt here, be able to help mold the clay and crystallize it into something that, I mean, that's phenomenal if you're able to have a resource like that. I did not, but I think it's a really valuable thing because sometimes they can pull out of the individual what they're not even thinking about. Having a pro look at your work and say, I don't think you thought about this, or you have three different voice tones. I really wish somebody said that. I wrote my book 700 times in order to get it, and every cartoon I drew 52 times each. I'm sorry, 52 cartoons. I drew each one of them 7 times,
Mhm.
and it was to get that feeling of, and I wrote this in Frequency Matters, the ding. It's this feeling of that's the one. That's the one. That's the idea, that's the concept, that's the cartoon, but, it's raw. In my you can, you will, you did, micro changes, macro transformation, frequency matters is, completely handcrafted. I sat in my computer, didn't have a formal editor. Frequency matters, I did. I outsourced an editor to help streamline that, but, not the first one.
Why ooh, and I know play you've got some questions, plus I'll let you,
No, go ahead.
play on this journey for a minute, but why that book? Why this the content that you've written on these first 2 books? What was it that you why did you wanna that's just really my question, like, why? Why that content? Why now? What impact are you trying to make on the human being that's reading and going on this journey with you?
As I went through the journey, the answers to the questions started to come. A lot of times I would have an inspiration, or something would come up from with inside, and I would move in a direction and I would just follow through. Yeah, I always wanted to write a book. I always stapled things together and created them. But I felt like a book was inside of me, that I was born, and this sounds silly, but born to make books. When someone said, what do you want to do in your life? Oh, I want to make books. And I literally would make them. But there was a sort of spiritual slant to my material where I really felt that if folks understood complicated ideas in a playful way, in a way that it's not a physics book, it's not a heavy text, it's joyful. It actually represents exactly what my message is, which is a high, playful, joyful, expansive energy. So I didn't want to write about this playful, positive energy with something that was orchestrated in a heavy way. So that was really the idea of it. I also transparently knew that the ideas were unconventional. I knew that, trying to pass myself off as a quantum physicist was not in integrity, but I am an artist. And I can take these ideas and I can crystallize them and hopefully help someone understand it. Follow my intuition, follow what I felt I was called to do, follow what those prompts are, and trust it. And, take action. Too often we have these ideas and we don't take action. And as messy as the journey was, I am so glad I did. I really look back as I've gotten older, to pin back, Jeff, to what you were talking about with your children. I look back, I'm so glad I had that courage to just move forward in something that was in my heart. It just really, I really felt that I was called to do it. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I love that. It's such a powerful message. I mean, like you say, you're not a neuroscientist, you're not a quantum physics professor, but you saw the power of the ideas and how it can change people's lives for the better. The idea of this frequency and getting into an energy that is more positive and creative versus what shuts us down is when we are feeling, the negative vibes and then, whether it's mojo vibes or whatever we want to call it. But when we're in this negative mojo, it's very destructive to our lives and our relationships and how we impact others, along the way. So I love the messaging. I love what you're about and the fact that you felt called to this. Um,
Thank you.
what, as you kind of look at your work where you're going on and speaking, what do you mostly, when you're out there speaking in front of audiences or consulting, what's the premise of is it around these ideas, or is it more expansive than that, or getting into specific applications? I'm curious about your work that you're doing with human beings.
Sure. It depends on the audience. It depends on what they ask me for. The foundation is personal and professional transformation. It's getting to the heart of it. Let's take the X-ray out and let's really look at what's going on. I'll give you an example. I was hired to speak in Boston, and there was a group of women that recently all just lost their partner, and they didn't have support or insurance. And so I was hired to go in there, and she had this beautiful outline, we were going to spend time together. All these objectives were all set, and my job was to go in there and talk about XYZ 1, 2, 3. And I went in. I was very excited, and true to form, I felt that the group needed something different. Not so much away from the outline, but we needed something a little different. So I started to speak, and I wanted to please the client. So I'm going through the outline, and I'm naming the different things we had to unpack. And this one woman raises her hand, and I'm up there thinking, I'm a professional speaker. And then all of a sudden, she says, "I just really want to know how you do your eyebrows." And I know I'm sitting here with 2 men, but she
I was
had.
thinking the exact same thing.
Were you really? Yeah,
No,
yeah,
I'm kidding.
I know. Exactly. Well, I'll tell you offline if you're really that interested, though. But it threw me completely off because I wanted to please the client. I'm looking at the outline, and I'm looking at the client. And then I'm looking at the outline, looking at the client, and I have this person that wants to know how I'm doing my eyebrows. And I thought, what is the highest value here? Why am I really hired here? And that is sort of the style I have, whether it is a speaking engagement, or I'm working with a university or a school or executive coaching, retreats especially. Why am I hired here? So I ended up throwing out the outline and just recognizing the highest value was that this group of individuals really needed to connect with each other. They needed to really form relationships and friendships and really have that need met before I would go in there and talk about particles and positive and the 5 pillars in my first book and the 5 pillars in my second book. You can't really reach someone if they have a need that is not being met. So one of the things I often do in my programs is as I try to meditate, I try to stay receptive, I try to really listen. Why am I there, and how can I serve? And if time gave me more skill. In the early in my career, I have a lot of mistakes, but time gave me more skill, and I have a lot more to learn. But it allowed me to know when to take a risk and when not to. And so we ended up changing the whole entire program. Everything ended up being this huge, beautiful outcome. Folks were crying, they were hugging each other, and I really thought that the client was going to be upset with me, and she just pulled me aside, gave me a tight hug, and she's like, "I don't know how or what made you go in that direction, but it's exactly what these women needed at the time." And I don't know if that resonates, but I think that when we are when we have, and this is in the first book, when we have the right intention, and then we hold space to really be receptive to what the needs are and the highest value, and then we lean on our skill and our ideas and our intelligence to help us through that. It's kind of a hat trick for transformation, whether it's personal or professional. It's the same in leadership as you're going to get in a team session, the same, situation you're going to get with somebody that's going through a crisis. Set the intention, hold the space, be receptive to what is the need and what is the highest value here. And then have the courage to move in the direction with all the skill set that we learn, peppered with all of our mistakes along the way.
I think what, as you're talking about that, it makes me think a little bit about this. It's interesting that it's not dissimilar to even this solo act of writing. And there's something about being fully present in the moment as a writer. And I think where sometimes writers get sideways with this is if that, and again, it comes to that blank page idea that if that throws you, that presence can be through outlining. You can be thinking and you can be constructing an outline and you can just be very in the moment and intentional and fully present. And what was fun for me as a fiction writer where you control all the variables, you control the world, you can make everyone do whatever you want them, you can do terrible things to your characters, right? This is your job as a fiction novelist. What was fascinating to me sometimes is I felt like the characters made decisions I was not prepared for. And at the end of the writing session, I would suddenly realize I'm not sure why that happened, and I don't know how to get them out of it. And would go to bed with no idea at all of what I was going to do to get these characters out of this situation, that frankly I put them in, but somehow I took my hand off the wheel. And invariably, the next day, just sleeping on it, coming back to it, I would figure it out. There would be it's something would click, and you'd start to move forward. So, I think that in that being open to, as a presenter, having someone ask about eyebrows, but as a writer, your own intuition and instinct, sometimes you need to let go of the wheel a little bit and say, I don't know why I'm being pulled this way. I don't know, and again, fiction writing is a great toolbox, right? But I don't know. I seriously do not know why this character did this thing and how we're going to get out of it. And I don't know how to write myself out of it. It is a fascinating, interesting experience that's sometimes hard for me to vocalize as a writer. But I'd love, like, when you hear that kind of thing, how does your mind think about it in terms of frequency and presence and how you show up? Like, does that feel like, oh yeah, that feels like very congruent to the kinds of things that I experience, on stage, maybe alone as a writer? Like, talk about that if you would, because I'd love to hear your perspective on it.
Yes, absolutely. If you could see my particles, and maybe in another 10 or 15 years we'll be able to see everybody's particles, and then no one yeah, and then that becomes really vulnerable. But I'm just so just excited hearing you say that, because they're completely parallel. It's the way we're utilizing energy. They're absolutely parallel. You are allowing the creative process to move through you, and not judging it and allowing it to sort of surface. And I'm just laughing. I love the whole, I don't know why that character did that. That is hysterical, and it is brilliant. But that is, you're trusting the process. You're trusting that there's a flow of creative energy here, and I'm going to allow it to move in the direction that it wants to move in. There's a faith in that. There's a trust in that the way the energy is moving. And I 100% resonate. I think the creative process, whether it's speaking, whether it's writing a book or a movie, I mean, you're the screenwriter. Um, it's a creative process where we are part of it, but we also have to let it happen to us. We
Mhm.
have to let it happen to us. And there's a fearlessness that comes with that. There's a fearlessness that comes with that. Like, oh, my character's going that way, but you have this sort of confidence that I can shape it as it moves into a new direction.
Yeah, I think it blows people's minds when you'll tell them something like, I have never written a fiction book where I have known the ending.
Hmm.
I've never known where that book was gonna go. It was going to just get there. Now, what does that mean as a technical craft? It means you are doing a lot of revisions, because you do things, you have setups with no payoffs, you have payoffs with no setups. So you are gonna be in the revising. So you have to prepare yourself. Like, yeah, you take that creative journey, let it take you, and maybe this is more of the clay metaphor. You're just getting that clay on there, but you're gonna have to go back, and you'll start to fine tune it, and you'll put all the logic pieces together, and that's kind of the process. But I loved your fearlessness and faith, because it does require that. And again, for those who are more analytical, that same process can happen. It just happens as you outline. So it
Yes.
doesn't mean that you're a discovery writer, and it doesn't mean it's happening, in the moment where your characters, like mine, just do things that really annoy me, and then I have to figure out how to solve their problems for them because they put me in bad situations. But you'll do that in outlining, because if you're an outliner, you're thinking, okay, here's, so talk about a movie, right? It's very specific. You have scenes, you have beats, you have 3 acts, right? Everything is very, fractal in a way, and
Yeah.
if you're an outliner, you just have all that mapped out, but you're still going through that creative machination. You're just doing it in the outlining process instead of the discovery process, like a writer just, blank page and let's go. So the same thing kind of happens. It's just an outliner is doing their revisions kind of real time through it, versus a discovery writer. So I like to throw those to Jeff because sometimes I think Jeff worries that he doesn't have Renaissance fair clothing and a lute, and he's not going to find this mythical muse, and he's just completely thrown off by all of this, and that his brain, like, it's okay to outline it and put it together. You're just shifting that work to a different place.
I'm tempted to get on some kind of hallucinogens to get in the creative process.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like that would help a lot. That's
Well,
That's
really
and
tapping
fun,
into
Joel.
energy when you start to do that, yeah.
yeah, and sometimes it sounds mystical. And look, when I talk about it, sometimes it feels a little out of body mystical because I don't know where everything is coming from. I mean, again, my hand's on the wheel, but I get really surprised. Sometimes you laugh at characters that do things that make you and my wife is like, "Are you laughing at your own jokes as you're writing?" I'm like, "Yes." It's like, "You nerd." Like, like, that's such a strange thing. Like, how do you laugh at your own, like, you're kind of there, but you're not, it's not you. You're in this mix. You're channeling something. People channel it in different ways, and I think the one thing I just hope that people get away from this is if you have that kind of energy, and maybe this is where you can see if I'm talking about it correctly, like, embrace it, like, just do it. And if you need that structure and you kind of need that out, you need to, like, work at it differently than that, you channel that energy and get it through. They're not dissimilar, they just have different approaches based on where you are either finding, um you're energized to do it that way, or you're completely intimidated and don't ever want to do it that way.
Yes, I love that you laugh at your own jokes because, that is a sign of playing with the universe. If I can use my language, you're having fun, you're playing with the universe, you're enjoying the creative process, and some of that energy may be coming from you and some of that energy might be, all around you. You're just receptive to it. And when we are receptive to that energy and we are having fun with it, um and we're not judging it and pulling it out, then we can shape it later. But what I liked that you said that I think is so important is that we are very different. Our minds are very different, and sometimes an outline is exactly what that person needs to feel the confidence of this is going to be first, second, third, fourth, and you can rearrange your outline, and you can even have an out. You can get bricks and write with a Sharpie marker. You can get a bunch of big white rocks with a Sharpie marker and just write a bunch of ideas down and then keep rearranging them. So an outline has an infinite number of ways to do it. It could be a linear outline. It could be the bubbles and cubes. It can be, the whiteboard example. But the key that I think you said that I absolutely love is you have a joyfulness in the journey, and you're having fun with it. And if we're so heavy on, is this making sense? Is this the right thing? That does come, in the refinement period. I would not have written that first book or the second book if I had weighted myself down too early. That creative process of yes, you can have pillars, but allowing yourself to play a little bit, I think, is important.
It was actually an inadvertent strategy. I wish I had been smart enough to think about it, but when I wrote my first book, which is Bad Unicorn, which is about a unicorn named Princess the Destroyer, so that tells you a little bit about it. I had to make eye contact with 10-year-old girls who were holding the book at a book signing, and I'm like, "I'm not sure this is the unicorn book you're looking for." But, uh, when I wrote it, part of what I felt like, it's such a big thing to write a book. I'm just gonna take all governors off. I'm not gonna think about genre. I'm not gonna think about what sells. I'm not gonna think about anything other than, if I had to read this to my 12-year-old, then I think it's funny. And that was
Ye
the only test. And I thought it was simply to get the barriers out of the way. Then I would write the real book. Then I'd write the commercially viable book. Then I would write the book that the editors, because I'd gotten that get a book out of my head because it seemed like a big thing. And then little did I know that was the thing that served me because I didn't have any restrictions. I broke genre rules. I did things you weren't supposed to do. My editor loved it. Found an agent within a couple weeks. We sold it to Simon Schuster within a couple weeks. We sold a trilogy, and I think I've told this story with Jeff before, right? My agent would call and said, "What are the next two books?" And I'm like, "I don't know." Like, you have 30 minutes to come up with the next two books and send them to me. And so I just made stuff up and Simon Schuster bought the trilogy, right? So all that is to say, not knowing that was serving me, what served me was just not being in my head at all and not thinking about anything other than what I thought was funny, interesting, and writing for myself. And who knew, right? That was the best way to write a book.
Uh-huh. I love hearing that. You're tapping in. You're truly tapping in. Your particles, if I might use that language, your frequency is tapping in to things that needed to come through you. And in frequency matters, I often talk about superheroes for that reason, or I joke a lot with Jedi's because in order to truly bring that kind of energy through, there's a lot of inner work that takes place. There's a lot of fearlessness and self-love and self-worth that comes first in order for that to come through, because a lot of times folks, and I was guilty of this, oh, this isn't good enough, or this cartoon is not sophisticated, I really should hire an illustrator, my cartoons are stick figures, but they were me, and I wanted that energy in it. To something you said that really resonated. I wanted the right energy in the book. So when that person said, "You come up with this," the universe is gonna deliver it immediately because you're receptive to it, you're the vehicle for it, and it's just gonna come through. You're not blocking that.
Yeah, 100%.
Kristen, I love your energy. If anyone's listening to the audio of this and not seeing the video of this, you should just see how much Kristen gets us lit up with connecting to some of these common themes and ideas. So obviously there's a great connection here, but Kristen, the work you're doing is so impactful in changing others and leading them on this journey to kind of that self-discovery and alignment with the right things for them in their lives. I'm going to take a little bit of risk, and I don't know the answer to this question, but how have you changed in the process from, if you look back 10 years ago, um, and then kind of today with this journey of writing and creating and finally kind of getting this content out there to where you're really expanding your impact. What's been your journey of change? Maybe you can share a little bit of that, and then we can wrap things up. But very curious about your own transformation.
Yes, I had a transformation where I went through a collection of different losses in my life, and I know when my mother passed away, that is such a significant loss, and I went through that journey. It really helped me to realize how important it is to get your art, your dreams, the things that are inside of you out. I think sometimes, 10 years ago, I have so many ideas. I just want to get them out and crystallize them. But when I lost my mother, and I'm looking at the last 10 years, it shaped my lens. It shaped my lens in that it helped me to realize that there are so many people in the world right now that are not living their unique recipe, that are not living what they're born to live and do what they want to do, and life is short. And so that was a sort of perspective change for me when you have a loss like that, where you really want, when the opportunity is in front of you, and you have a book inside of you, you have something creative inside of you, move forward in it. I become more seasoned, but I think just in any direction that we go, we always become wiser, and we always become more mindful, and we recognize that that loss teaches us that one of the most important things is not only the people that we love and the relationships that we have, but what contribution are we making in the world for people to learn from us, to learn from our journey, to learn from the things that we've experienced. I don't know if that answered your question or I got too personal.
Kristen, absolutely love that. And for those who are listening, if you want to tap into someone's amazing, creativity, but also alignment with being aligned with the right kind of energy, Kristen, you are absolutely gifted in that. I look, kind of circling back a little bit, but your gift of being an empath, if that's the right word, and tapping into the human soul. I know you've also a fan of the book Untethered Soul, which I am as well, and that unleashing and connecting in a way that really can change us as human beings. I absolutely love what you're about, and you do have great eyebrows. So I've just got to throw that in too. That is a great story. But appreciate and love having you on. How can people best connect with you and reach you if they want to learn more about you
Well,
and your work?
thank you, Jeff, first for the compliment very much, and it's, kristinmackey.com or frequencymatters.org, and both of my books are on Amazon.
Well, that's
Love it.
awesome. Yeah, well, Kristen joined us on short notice too. We really appreciate her. I learned a ton, and I think the one thing I just for anyone that's struggling with a book out there, one, you have a story in you. You have a uniqueness that nobody else in the world, as you were talking about, Kristen, and that perspective is valuable, and people want to learn from it, and it's a gift that you will find an immense amount of joy as you find ways to share that. So I love that, and I love just your advice of just moving forward. If you just whatever, if it feels big, if it feels intimidating, just take that next step. Whether it's writing an outline, a title of a book, right? There's just start taking action towards that thing that you want, and it's amazing how the universe just coalesces around you when you do that, and things happen. So I love that. Loved your message. Loved feeling your energy as well today, Krista Mackey. We hope we'll talk to you again and maybe meet you in person at one of your seminars or something. That'd be awesome
There
too.
you
You're
go,
out in
yeah.
Florida, right? Is that where you're
Yeah,
located? Yeah.
yes.
So not in the summer, but in the winter we'll come visit maybe. Yeah.
Well,
But
and
anyway, thanks again, Kristen, to my co-host Jeff, for all of you joining us for another edition of Author Unknown.